Yes, indeed, Steeler Nation. We are back for another great week of shows. The Sick Podcast, Steeler Crazy. As always, I am Jay York Football. Alongside of me, Mic'd Up Sports One. And it is sunny right now and 60 degrees in Pittsburgh right now. So I'm absolutely loving it. Got to take the dog for a walk today. And now we're doing a podcast with another great guest. What's the temperature in Florida right now?
I mean, it's beautiful, but we're a little cloudy today. That rarely happens. It seems like you guys are in a fantastic mood. I wonder if that good mood will continue, even if we learn that Russell Wilson is brought back to the Steelers.
I'm for it, man. I just tweeted it out today and been getting some slack. I'm still on the train. Bring back Russell Wilson and draft Jackson Dart. So, and we'll talk to our guest about that coming up here next. Shane, let's take it to the end zone.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy.
Aaron Smith shields. Flacco, Polamalu takes it home. Super Bowl 43. Pittsburgh might be bound for that thanks to number 43.
The sickest Pittsburgh Steelers podcast.
Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
Yes, sir. Our guest today is an NFL Network analyst, former scout, and VP of player evaluation for the Giants, former, I should say. And, of course, he's got some bling, two-time Super Bowl champion as well. It's none other than our guy, Marc Ross. What's going on, Marc?
How you guys doing?
Good. We're thrilled to have you. You got any bling behind you? Is it show?
Yeah,
you wear them around?
It's on the shelf over here. I keep them in the nice little case and then break them out on special occasions, just shock everybody, especially living down here in Philly. I'm in Philly now, lived in New York 18 years, moved back to Philly because I'm here. And whenever I wear it, people are a little bit confused. But yeah, definitely proud of them.
Be careful. I don't have to tell you that. But
I started with the Eagles, so I'm good. I got street cred because
the
Eagles.
That's a good point.
97 to 04. So I'm good to go, man. I can walk any street in Philly and be fine.
Beautiful. Fair enough. Well, I want to talk about something that obviously helped propel those teams to, a great amount of success, like we just talked about the Giants, which is what we just saw in Indianapolis, which is the combine, right? This whole draft process leading up to it. I'm always so intrigued to talk to somebody who's a former scout involved in the front office and, of course, player evaluation being really your niche, about a few bullet points. First, tell me a little bit about the interview process and what really jumps out to you, right? Or what maybe is a knock whenever you're talking to some of these prospects.
Well, first of all, the combine has changed so much from when I first started to now, where back then it was a lot more organic and players just showed up and worked out and then did the interviews without any preparation. They're like, let me show up and be myself. And then each year it's gotten more and more where, okay, here comes the training coaches on the field. Here comes the interview coaches. Here comes the Wonderlic prep coaches. So each year you saw that more and more where players were a lot more of their real raw selves. And then it started becoming, oh boy, who's getting coached up, who's prepared for these drills. So now it's such a big business and there's so many trainers, there's so many of these combine prep coaches, pro day coaches that, you really, it's gotten away from the raw organic player. So that you really have to keep that in mind throughout this process. And that's why you see a lot of these disconnect between what scouts see on film and then what they see at the combine. And it's more and more of, man, really good players. You go to the combine now, it's just like, well, where did this guy come from? Where did this guy come from? Where, the Mike Mamula, who was the first one way back, I wasn't with the Eagles back then, if y'all remember that name from Boston College.
Oh, yeah.
He was really the first one to say, okay, let me make a name for myself at the combine. And now everyone has a chance to do that.
Yeah, so I'm curious, right? How much of that combine did you guys actually care about? It's probably not the right word, but you turn on the tape. Obviously, I feel like you're getting most of the meat and potatoes. But how much did the combine factor into actually changing minds?
Well, if you look at certain teams stick with what they see on film. The better teams, the better drafting teams draft football players, and the combine, they don't invent players from that. I mean, just right off the top of my head, does anyone have any idea what Cam Hayward did at the combine or his pro day? You just knew that he just kicked when he played and got after. Does anyone remember what Watt did at his combine or pro day? I don't, but I know when he watched him, he balled out. And that's really, if you go through that with all of the players, the really good elite players in the NFL, you can say, oh, yeah, he was a hell of a player. And then you go through, and it's funny, every year at the combine, they show the top 20 fastest players. And it's like, that guy's not good. That guy's not good. No one makes it. And you can go down every list of whatever highest 40, and they really don't turn out to be good players. But we go through it every year where teams get fooled by, let's just draft off of these measurables. And the new buzzword now are the traits. We never had it. We never talked about traits. We just talked about good players and size and strength and speed. So there's still teams that get fooled by the numbers and the traits, as opposed to this guy can just ball and he's going to keep balling out.
I thought of two former Steelers whenever you mentioned that. One, of course, not really remembered as a Steeler, Darius Hayward-Bay. And then Trey Archer, another guy that, he's more of a mid-round pick, but just ran an absolutely blazing 40, and that didn't amount to much either. Are there guys you're particularly proud of that you really felt like you were a pioneer in pushing them, whether it's the Eagles, the Giants, any other team you were with?
Yeah, I think my biggest, my proudest draft player, and this was with the Eagles, running back from Villanova named Brian Westbrook.
Yep.
He was the complete outlier on everything you should be, and Brian's a good friend of mine, and I joke with him all the time. He was too short. He was too small. He had 2 ACL tears. He played at a small school. He didn't run fast. He didn't jump high, but the guy was just an absolutely phenomenal football player, at that level. And it turned out to be, we drafted him in the 3rd round, really just thought he would be a third down back and a special teams guy, because he had prolific return number at Villanova. And really we were just happy as can be to get him in the 3rd. Had to fight a lot for him now. Had to bring him in for a private workout because we still had people that were concerned about all those things I just talked about, came in at the workout, and he just caught everything. I mean, it was amazing what he did just as far as catching, not running and jumping, but with his hands and balance and body control and all that. And then turns out to be, at his prime, 2nd, 3rd best back, whatever in the league, most versatile back in the league. So he's the one. I can go down a list of a whole lot of other guys, but he is the one I'm most proud of, just because it was, despite having 0 of what you should have as far as the standard, he became one of the best players in the league.
That's an awesome call and great stuff. People don't associate Villanova with football, so that's another part of that I'm sure there are a ton of questions heading into the draft. Jordan?
Yeah, so that's great stuff too. I know, but Villanova is known as a basketball school, so that was Mike. Mike was, believe it or not, growing up. Me and Mike have been childhood friends for a while now, and he was a big Donovan McNabb fan. So Brian Westbrook, that name definitely.
Your teams, Pinkston, Fred X, Westbrook.
Yeah. Well, Donovan's another one I could go on and on about. I mean, that was my 2nd year scouting. I was 24 years old, and was the area scout there. And of course, leading up to the draft, if everybody remembers, it was the Eagles had to take Ricky Williams. And this is when running backs were, you got to draft a running back to build your team around. And it was still that, what's more important? And, the whole city of Philadelphia, we had the mayor going on sports radio saying we got to draft Ricky Williams. And it wasn't just Donovan versus Ricky. That was the year it was Achilles Smith and Dante Culpepper, and Tim Couch was the first pick in the draft. So it was him versus a whole lot of, about a group of 6, but it was mainly the Ricky Williams situation. And as a young scout, I'm like, nah, this is the guy. I got to know him really well as a person, his family, the whole deal. Thought he was just a phenomenal player. And even then it was, can he fit into the pros? He came from that Syracuse offense. That was a little bit different, but if you really dug into what he was doing, that really transferred. And we had Andy Reid had just became our head coach, and he was like, yes, I can work with this guy. So, for me, it was, despite everybody against what we were going to do, like, nah, this is the guy. and it turned out to be
worked out pretty well. Yeah, so let's stay along the lines of quarterbacks. There's a big debate in Pittsburgh right now. Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. Just kind of touch on that and kind of where you're leaning towards, if either of those two.
Yeah, well, I thought, and I talked about this ad nauseum, of course, with the network, because so we talked about it every day. At the time of both of their signings, I thought Justin Fields was the best option. I came to the Steelers camp, and that's when Russell was hurt, remember? And I thought Justin Fields was the best option. Justin jumps in there. He plays well in spurts, did enough for the win. And then they switched over to Russell, and I thought that was a mistake. Of course, the first couple games, Russell plays well, but then peters off, and I thought maybe just get Justin back in there. So all along, I thought Justin was the best option. But really what you're talking about, whether going into next year, if they're making the decision, is what is the standard now for Pittsburgh? And I have a lot of great friends in Pittsburgh, so I get to hear it from my end of it, the professional end, but also them from Steelers fans. And, it's just a running joke now. Yep, the standard is just getting over 500 and getting bounced out of the playoffs. That's our new standard now. And that's whether whoever's the quarterback next year, you're probably looking at the same sort of season again. You really can't realistically look and say, yep, we're going to go beat Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, and now the Chargers are coming up. Oh, the Texans aren't going anywhere. And, you're really staring at that group of teams. Cincinnati is right there with Burrow. And that's really, as the Steelers and Steelers fans, you're looking at is, okay, we're talking a lot about who's going to be our quarterback, but does it even matter? Can we beat all these other teams? Can we string together these wins against those teams? And that's the frustrating part for, as y'all know, the Steeler fan base of you've been stuck in this zone for a long time.
Yeah, Pittsburghers are drinking a lot of these.
The
Coke.
So a name that has been coming up as well, Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, I feel like it's a pipe dream. I agree. I just think that it's just not. And Mike kind of agrees and alluded to this in previous podcasts. And we had it with Russell Wilson, but I think it's even more with Aaron Rodgers, the circuits that follows him. Just kind of talk about him possibly coming to Pittsburgh. I could already see your answer.
Yeah, it's that would be a disaster. And as you mentioned, at least with Russell, Russell's a team guy, and he says all the right things. He wants to do right. He wants to give credit to the teammates and work together. Now, there is a lot that still comes with Russell just being Russell Wilson, but now you bring in that with an older Aaron Rodgers, another year removed from not being a good Aaron Rodgers, and the circus. I mean, he got everybody fired with the Jets, and the Packers couldn't wait to get him out the door. So if you're the next team in line, what do you why would you want to bring Aaron Rodgers into your organization? And I think it will be a bizarre, of course, we're going to talk about it ad nauseum through this whole thing on the NFL Network, but I just can't see any way anybody, any brain trust would sit back with your GM and an owner and see what happened with what has happened with Aaron Rodgers in the last few years and say, yep, we want that circus on our team right now.
Yeah. I mean, again, great quarterback. I just feel like it's just not a good fit for Pittsburgh. And obviously he's a little bit past his prime, even though he showed that he still can perform at a high level. Before I throw it back over to Mike, what about drafting a QB?
For the Steelers?
Yeah.
Well, you have to do – something has to take place. I mean, you really have to look at all options, and you can't just sit back and say, okay, we think we can go win with what we have. So – yes, depending on the board and where they're set. I don't know the exact number where y'all are picking this year, but it's all right. Well, who's the draft class? You have to say, okay, Cam Ward's gone, and Shador most likely will be gone, and then that next tier of Louisville and Dart and okay, now who else? And
Milroe, yeah.
So you're really just looking at, all right, we're taking a chance on one of these guys at the right point. But again, that just has to be all those conversations that are going to be had between Omar and Mike leading up to the draft and say, okay, where do we feel comfortable? Which one of this group of guys do we really like? And once we get them in here, what's really going to be their role?
Hey, before we get you out of here, I mean, you mentioned obviously the feeling in Pittsburgh, incredibly down on Mike Tomlin. We have folks throwing out billboards suggesting that he needs to be fired. Nationally, we speak with a lot of guests who have the opposite view. So I just want to see where you're at in terms of your thoughts on Mike Tomlin in general.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. It's a double-edged sword, and again, as I mentioned, I got a lot of friends from Pittsburgh, and have heard Pittsburgh sports radio over not just the last couple of years, but I mean, going back 8 years ago, where people were saying, "Get rid of this guy." So, of course, he's a lightning rod, and the national media, we look at, okay, they don't have much, and they're still winning and getting above board. But again, the standard for Steelers fans is to win the Super Bowl. And if you're not winning Super Bowls, then, okay, we have to get better. But the stability of the 3 head coaches in the past 40 years, whatever that crazy stat is for Pittsburgh, that's the way Pittsburgh runs their organization. But I think it might be time to say we have to be a little bit more forward thinking. We might have to rip this Band-Aid off to move forward and not just be content with getting 9 wins every year and knowing that we're not good enough to win the Super Bowl. So I always look at things in the lens of, all right, can we win a Super Bowl? And at this point, is it Mike Tomlin's fault? If you stuck a really good quarterback in there with it, could he get it done? Possibly. But something really has to change there in order to break out of this cycle, and instead of just sitting there hovering in purgatory for a long time.
Yeah, winning cures all, right? It's so many moving parts. You're like, is it the OC? Is it the quarterback? Is it Tomlin? Do you really know at the end of the day, right? I mean,
and that's the problem where the quarterback hell that y'all been in, you can't really determine. If you look at any other coach and say what they've done, I think Tomlin has done better than any other coach you throw in that situation probably would have done. Now, that being said, those decisions of getting better at quarterback, how much is he a part of that to say, well, this is holding back how do we run our offense, and the hiring offensive coordinators aren't very good but still have a bad quarterback. So all of that works in together to say wherein lies the truth and all of that about the true value.
Yeah. Fantastic stuff. Hey, what do you got coming up? Where can everybody find you, Mark?
Well, we got the Path of the Draft show coming up here soon. Free Agent Frenzy next week. You're not a great group of free agents, but we're going to sell the heck out of it for the network to talk about how great these guys are. But yeah, so Free Agent Frenzy next week, and then the Path of the Draft will be popping up there on NFL Network.
Well, we really appreciate your time. Keep up the great coverage. We'll definitely have to do it again. Hopefully Steelers can find the quarterback of the future, or at least a quarterback to make a Super Bowl run here soon. Thank you for your time.
If not, you're coming out of retirement. Or not retirement, but you got to, come on, Steelers, make the call. Make the call. Thanks, Mark. Pleasure,
right,
man.
Guys. My pleasure.
Thank you.
I tell you what great analysis from somebody who spent time in war rooms, in draft rooms, right? At the top of front offices, talking with GMs and owners and coaches consistently. I found it really interesting, his take on Aaron Rodgers and how immediate he was like, nope, no chance, because you got some fans who are kicking back.
I did the same thing. I remember.
And as somebody who's been in front offices, he was like, hell no, you got everybody fired. Why would you want this guy? So that's somebody behind the scenes that has dealt probably with so many different personalities. And for him to just immediately say, he was shaking his head before he even finished the question. So there was no glossing over it. Like, well, if you can deal with it, you can still play. I wonder if he has the same sentiment as a bunch of guys that he worked with in the past who are still in front offices.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's just not at this point. I'm before bringing in Aaron Rodgers, I would consider a full rebuild, and I know that the Steelers don't do that, but it's really reaching that point now where it's like, what are we doing here? We're just in a standstill, a stalemate. Just really have to figure something out. I tweeted it today. I think that the best. See, my whole thing is, and this is my perspective on it, is that I don't want to bring another new quarterback in, have them learn the whole system. At least if you bring Russell Wilson back, okay,
or Justin Fields.
I'm on the Wilson train. Yes. So bring one of the two quarterbacks back, okay, and then draft a quarterback or bring in one of these free agent guys. At least you have someone in there to start with that knows the system, and then if that doesn't work out, you have someone that could come in and see what they're. That's why I think drafting QB is the best. I just don't think going out and getting one of these guys and throwing them in there is going to be the best. I don't know, man. It's just a quarterback is the most important position in all of sports. So you need someone in there that you could count on. And I think too, everyone leads back to, Russell Wilson, like that schedule was, they played the two teams that were in the Super Bowl, the Ravens. Like, I get it. Like, but the defense, shit the bed. Like, there was other things that led into, I'm not saying that, his play was great, but there's a lot of things that factor into it rather than just quarterback play when, so just something.
I think it's less of a Russell Wilson problem, to be honest with you. I think people would acknowledge that he played well, but I think it's more of like, hey, we went 10-7. We didn't win a playoff game. We got blown out at the end of the season. If we run it back with the same exact team, why should we expect any different? You know what I mean? I think it's less of like, oh, this guy sucks, I hate him, and more of like, all right, we saw what it was capable of, and it didn't work, so try something new.
Yeah, and I just don't understand the Justin Field obsession. He's an exciting player at times. But to me, he's just a mediocre quarterback. I just don't see him as like a superstar. And I get he's only 26 years old, but it's like in a change of scenery, it might not be in Pittsburgh. But it seems like it's definitely leading towards that. I just don't really see this ending well for the Steelers. I mean, I hope the best for him if he's the quarterback, but I'm just here to give my opinion.
Well, Mark made a really good point. And let's be honest, at the end of the day, whether it's Wilson or Fields, even though I'm banging the drum for Fields, you're not going to beat Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Stroud with either. And so I think that's –
And the defense is getting old. Let's face it. The defense is getting old. I mean, TJ Watt's 30, Cam's, up there. These guys are – it's just, I don't know, man. There's a lot that plays into it. Football is the biggest team sport, and you got to, fire on all cylinders. And at the end of the day, if you can't do that, you're going to end up with the results that we've been getting. So we'll see. But yeah, really, really great stuff, Mark. Man, dude, it's funny because I watch that show, so it's really cool to have a guest like
Me too.
On here.
Path to the Draft, great show, Free Agent Frenzy. We've had a couple of them on. We've had Rhett Lewis on the old podcast, and Adam Rank does both of those things.
Yeah.
So our, colleague with the Sick Podcast, Steelers Crazy, you can find on both of those as well.
We'll see what his take. But yeah, we're going to be having some prospects coming up. It's been jumping up on the Steelers mock draft, so stay tuned. Like I said, man, I like during the season, and I know you can attest to this, but man, it's just exciting because I feel like the little optimism that we have right now for Steeler Nation, it's leading into the draft, and the combine's done, and our sick team was there covering it. Just great clips and great coverage. So thank you. And yeah, we're just going to keep rocking and rolling. We'll see you at the end of the week with another great guest. As always, I am Jay York Football. Next to me, Mic'd Up Sports 1. Follow us, subscribe, and yeah, man, it was really cool too. Shout out to our guy over in Ireland. It was just really cool to see that reach, and really excited for that too. There's a lot of things going on. Just gotta make it all make sense, I guess you could say. So stay crazy. Thank you. Subscribe. And we'll see you guys soon. The Sick Podcast, Steelers Crazy. Another great one. Shane, you know what to do.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Steelers Crazy on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.